Salam and peace. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and you're watching Muslim Network TV. We are on Galaxy 19 satellite, where you're watching, as well as Amazon Fire TV. And you can always find us in the social media and everywhere, and of course on our own website, muslimnetwork.tv. So thank you so much for watching. And I'm a peace activist. I struggle for human rights. I call for freedom of all people. I'm against war. After the Holocaust and the extraordinary tragedy in Europe and the world wars in which no one cared for anyone's human right, the world came together with the realization that what has just happened is not acceptable. 152 countries since have signed a genocide convention that they will prevent and punish genocide. Unfortunately, it continues to happen. It happens yesterday, it's happening now. China, I have nothing against China. China should live there and thrive, and I'm not for Cold War. I want all people to grow and enjoy. But China has created the largest concentration camps since the Nazis. And the world is silent about it. Except the United States of America, there are some voices which are raising. Our Congress has passed a law. President has signed the Uyghur bill. But the world is silent. And America needs to do more. But in this silence, which is deafening by itself, there are some people who are speaking up. And these people are taking a great risk for themselves and their families. And these are Uyghur people themselves. And I thank them for their struggle, because anytime anyone tries to strive for freedom, they make freedom something which is desirable for rest of those people. And one such person was recently honored in the United States by a bipartisan commissioner by his appointment as a commissioner of USERF, that is the United States Commission for International Religious Freedom. Is a great bipartisan commitment of the United States to the religious freedom. And this is no other than Nuri Turkal. Welcome to Muslim Network TV, Nuri.
Thank you very much for having me.
Nuri Turkal is a lawyer and a human rights advocate. He's a commissioner of USERF, in addition to his professional career, which takes him in all places. Mr. Turkal has developed and devoted his time and energy to promoting Uyghur human rights and supporting American and universal democratic rights and norms. He's the first US educated Uyghur lawyer. He was born in a re-education camp at the height of Cultural Revolution, and he spent the first few months of his life in captivity along with his mother. He came to United States in 1995 as a student and was granted asylum. Turkal is currently in Washington, D.C. He's an attorney there and a chairman of the board of Uyghur Human Rights Project, which we work with and promote and support. He's co-founder of it in 2003. He also led the campaign to obtain the release of Uyghur prisoner of conscience, Rabia Qadir, which I had honor of interviewing. Thank you, Turkal, for that. Turkal has published policy-oriented commentaries in publications such as the Wall Street Journal, The Independent, and the Foreign Policy. He's testified before Congress, and I had honor of participating in some of those testimonies at the Congress. He has spoken about the Uyghur camps and advocating legislative response to China's atrocity. And many of his recommendations are incorporated into the bills in the Congress. Welcome, Nuri Turkal, to Muslim Network TV.
Thank you very much, Imam Malik. It's an honor to be on your show. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you in person and your organization that have been a critically important voice and force educating the American public, particularly Muslim American community, as well as the supporters of the Uyghur human rights, particularly on last 2 years. It's been an honor working with you.
Thank you so much, and congratulations on your appointment at the Commissioner of the USERF.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I am honored to be in this position. I have a tremendous respect for Speaker Pelosi. In fact, her office was the first congressional office that I was able to visit as a young student about some 20 years ago. And now that I get appointed to this position by Speaker Pelosi. Interesting world.
Well, only in America. And now you're not going to be just speaking for the Uyghur human rights, but you'll be speaking for the Uyghur rights of, religious rights for rest of the world.
Absolutely, absolutely. As a lawyer, as someone who has a training in international diplomacy, I'm always interested in rights issues around the globe, not only about the Uyghurs, but others, particularly the ones who have been underrepresented in international discourse. So I'd like to use this opportunity to share my experience, how to advocate oppressed ethnic and religious minorities like the Uyghurs, and also help to raise the voices for those who have not been getting enough attention around the world, particularly religious minorities.
Tell me China, I thought China is using the term re-education camps now for the concentration camp that they have built, but you're telling us that you were born in one of the re-education camps. So what was it and how it came about?
I never thought, Mujahid Malik, excuse me, Imam Malik, I have that I would be talking about the concept of never again, concentration camps, crime against humanity, and particularly the condition that I was brought to this world. To your audience, I'd like to underscore something so important, that the Uyghur people's suffering has been ongoing as long as I have been breathing. So the type of camp that I was born was mostly focused on Mao's ideology, the Cultural Revolution. Pretty much everyone within the China sphere were affected by it. But what we're experiencing today, since 2017 in particular, is a modern day cultural genocide. It's ethnic cleansing. It's crime against humanity, as correctly described by the United States Congress and Holocaust Museum. So the Chinese government has a very specific intention when they had the modern day concentration camp idea flirted, formulated, implemented. So they wanted to break the Uyghurs' lineage, connection, and roots. So when you look at the actual definition of genocide, the one for cultural genocide is not clearly defined. But oftentimes when you mention genocide, it's a loaded word, and the legitimate question follows, well, there has not been open physical harm. We don't know. No one knows. The world did not know what happened to the 6 million Jews after they've been exterminated. So it is not appropriate to even think that some sort of physical harm has been happening, imposed upon the Uyghur people. Radio Free Asia reported back in 2018 that the Chinese government has been actively building crematoria and also hiring people to work in those facilities. And those crematorium were built around the camps, around those 1,200 camps that German scholar Adrian Zenz was able to identify. So this is one of the young Uyghur students said I believe a year and a half ago in a public event, that there's no conflict, there's no controversy. This is so evident. Not only that the Uyghur activists and policymakers in the United States and legislators and the Muslim leaders like yourself have been telling the world that there's something horrific is happening. Let's look at the language that the Chinese government is using, as revealed in the New York Times leak, documents leaked through the New York Times last November. The Chinese government very specifically used the languages like Jizhong, meaning concentration. Well, they had concentration camp in mind. And the Chinese government officials publicly using the terms like transformation. What does that mean? Transformation means forcing people to become something that they have never been. To the Communist Party, Uyghurs' identity, religious practices have always been perceived as a sign of disloyalty or political threat, if you will. So they're trying to transform, quote unquote, very, very nice, almost harmless word. But when you look at the actual intent, they are engaging in human engineering, using their economic power diplomatically, and they're using the technological know-how to set up the surveillance state, as reported in this amazing documentary on Frontline, The Age of AI. And also they're using the public opinion and the rising Islamophobia, both in China and around the world, to squelch the silence. And also they're using their economic almighty or power to buy out silence, particularly in the Muslim majority countries. So, that's, one of the senior congressional leaders told me that in response to my briefing, why not everyone is screaming from the rooftop? This is horrific. So that should be the response. This should shock the conscience of the civilized world.
So Nuri, but China, it seems going full circle. What were the circumstances in which your mother was taken to those concentration camps?
So, like, it's similar to what is happening today. It was guilt by association. So the Uyghur family, who either influential or have nationalistic tendencies, there's nothing wrong with it. If you're proud Uyghur, proud Muslim, so be it. No one should interfere in that kind of personal choice and preference. But to the Chinese government, if you have connected to anyone by marriage or by blood who might have a separatist tendencies, or strong political beliefs, or tendency to maintain your cultural values, family values, even advocating your children to stay their marriage within the Uyghur family, that kind of stuff always been perceived as problematic for the Chinese. And simply put, to the Chinese government, the Uyghurs are different. Being different is unacceptable. Therefore, they must go through a transformation. It's a similar idea when they lock up my mother during that time. But what we experiencing today is different.
No, but before we come to what is happening now, I like to understand the circumstances of your mother. Was your mother illiterate, so they wanted to educate her? Was she active in politics, or she just was born Uyghur and that was enough?
No, just being Uyghur and being a daughter of my grandfather were enough reasons for Chinese to took her in. So she was pregnant, 6 months pregnant with me when they took her in. So I was born in a captivity, and she gave a birth to me while she was in cast chest down because she was injured previously. So horrific, I grew up hearing that terrible history that my mother and I went through because of our family background, ethnic background, and way of life, mainly.
So, but your father was spared for some reason.
No, no Uyghur intellectuals were spared. No Uyghur landowners were spared. No influential Uyghurs were spared. no educators, particularly. My father, as a retired university professor, he was sent to a labor camp for 3 years. So everyone, either you have, every family that has foreign contact, um, or political history, or if you have any social, which is very similar to what is happening today. Even today, they use a similar standard. When you look around, when you talk to Uyghurs around the world.
So what I'm trying to get at, Nori, is that what is happening right now, it didn't just start yesterday. That has been a consistent policy of Chinese. When you were born in a concentration camp, your father was taken to another labor camp. And that was when, about 40, 45, 50 years ago?
So this all this happened during the period of 1969 through 71.
Okay.
So that's an excellent point. When you listen to the Chinese narrative, or listen to the narrative, or the notion put up by sympathizers or apologists for Xi Jinping government, you hear as if that Uyghurs must have done something horrific or terrible, so that the Chinese government is justified to crack down in such a repressive way. This is not in response to that the Uyghurs has done something wrong or unacceptable to the Chinese. The fact that the Uyghurs are Uyghur, the fact that the Uyghurs wanted to have a separate country, the fact that Uyghurs wanted to run their own house affairs, political affairs, economic affairs, social affairs, in of itself were problematic for the Chinese government. So they're finding different ways to squelch Uyghur resentment and crush Uyghur desires and punish those who are not being compliant. So this has been going on.
Continuity of a long-term Chinese policy. It is.
Yes.
So you're watching Muslim Network TV, and this is Imam Malik Mujahid. I'm talking with Commissioner Nouri Turkle, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, it's your brother Zain Bika from South Africa. One of the first educational programs ever produced for Muslim children was the ever popular Adam's World series. The colorful and comical Muslim puppets stole the heart of a generation. Sound Vision will be releasing brand new episodes of Adam's World with the launch of a Adam's World app. Subscribers will enjoy new Adam's World episodes as they are released, as well as all the classic episodes of Adam's World. So visit adamsworldapp.com now to learn more, subscribe and enjoy new adventures of Adam and his friends. And let's keep helping tomorrow's Muslims today. Assalamu alaikum.
It's Adam's World. Believe me, there's a lot to see. Bismillah, let's explore.
Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid with Commissioner Nouri Turkle of USERV. Nouri, so consistently for long period of time, Chinese are trying to transform Uyghur people in something different. Why Uyghur people are different and what they are trying to transform them into?
The Chinese government and people in general, being other is very, very problematic. Um, I can't say that it's monolithic society, but throughout the history, there's some sort of deeply embedded hatred towards the others, namely the Eurasian Uyghurs. Um, but since Mao took over the country with the help of Stalin in 1949, during the different period in the 70s and 80s and 90s, they tried different methods. Today is a very important day, June 26th. This is today is actually 11 years ago. Today is a turning point politically, societally, for the Uyghur people and the Chinese government. The reason that I brought this up, in the past, pre-June 26, 2009, the Chinese called the Uyghurs different things. They call them splitist, they call them fundamentalist, but after the July 5 protests in response to the brutal killing of Uyghur individuals who were subject to forced labor, working on the Western assembly lines in one of the Chinese provinces, the Chinese government realized that carrot and stick policy didn't work. They need to root out any resentment, any type of appreciation that the Uyghurs have been adhered to on cultural and linguistic and religious aspect must be changed. They think that as long as the Uyghurs stay as a distinct ethnic group, as long as they are well fed and gather and exchange ideas, eventually they become a threat to the Chinese state. So they formulated different policies after the brutal crackdown on July 5, resulting from this incident in this toy factory. Chinese government flirted with different things. Some of them recommended, look, this prosperity, making Uyghurs wealthy didn't work because they will get them access to problematic countries. They're allowing them access to Saudi Arabia to perform pilgrimage, allowing them to go to the United States or sending their children to school, allowing them to go to Turkey to learn nationalism. So they find this economic life that the Uyghurs were selectively being enjoyed is also a problem. So they start looking to different methods, different policies. And some of them, being recently mentioned in the media, recommended, why don't we come up with a final solution to the so-called Xinjiang problem? The final solution is forced transformation. And in 2014, 2015 is another turning point where Xi Jinping goes to Uyghurs' homeland.
No, just a short break. You mentioned they use the term final solution in this case.
Yes, there is a term in Chinese. The scholars, Chinese scholars, had written before the current nightmare is created. There's actually a timeline specific article written on this transformation of the Chinese policy from carrot and stick to stick, switching to stick only. So during that.
So what was the incident which took place you're mentioning in the toy factory, the toys which our children use in America?
Yes. So now I'm so glad if I may use the word glad, the Americans start learning that the products that they buy for their children, even pajamas in Costco, have been produced by forced labor, the Uyghur forced labor.
Yeah, so, the State Department and a couple of scholars, I mean, at the Senate hearing, a couple of scholars mentioned that that Costco is buying the products which are manufactured by the exploitation of Uyghur
Yes.
forced labor.
So the the slavery is back. You know, for the American people, when you mention cotton, when you mention forced labor, it reminds them of the history that they gone through. So luckily, we're gaining a lot of traction on this particular issue. The think tanks, civil societies, the government entities, regardless of our political view. I think this administration has done a number of things on this particular issue, including to blacklist a bunch of China's entities. And also, there's an active legislative discussion in the US Congress to address the forced labor. So going back to the earlier point, if I may, I mean, this is important for your audience to know that there's been a serious policy deliberation within the Chinese academia, within the Chinese think tank, within the Chinese Communist Party leadership. So in 2015, when Xi Jinping visiting the Uyghurs' homeland, East Turkestan, he was dumbfounded somewhat that the Uyghurs are still living the Uyghur life. And he didn't like what he saw. And then in 2016, in August 2016, he promoted some of the policy experts describing as the Chinese Adolf Eichmann by the name Chen Zhengguo. He got relocated or promoted, if you will, from Tibet to East Turkestan to become a Xinjiang Communist Party chief. In Xinjiang, they use three types of government entities. One is the Communist Party, and then they have a regional government. The regional government, by practice, oftentimes is a Uyghur guy who's basically handpicked with literally no authority. And then there's another entity, which is a paramilitary. According to Pentagon estimate several years ago, there are about 2.5 million paramilitary troops stationed in the East Turkestan region. So they don't call it paramilitary, but they call it construction corps. That controls much of the water resources. And now the cotton field, it's controlled by them. They run their own prison system. They have their own universities. They have their own parallel government. So literally there's three governments in the region. So the top guy, who is the king, that was implanted by the Chinese government, a party secretary, thought that he needs to exceed Xi Jinping's expectation. This phrase reminds you, the listener, some history that we read in the book. So he wants to exceed the expectation of his superior and come up with this thing called de-extremification measure that went in effect in April 2017. That paved the way for today's the concentration camps, mass detention, surveillance state. What this particular quote-unquote legislation, the local legislation, which is very similar to what they're doing to the Hong Kong people, to legitimize their ruling, their persecution through legislative process, sanctioned 48 behaviors. This is available online. That includes your beard, the growing beard, wearing hijab. You had been a concentration camp, Imam Malik. I apologize for making such a ridiculous joke, but so your profile, your name, your look, your beard would make you a perfect candidate. And also, you say Assalamu alaikum. That would be one of the reasons that you would be perceived as an extremist. So, and then if you encourage your daughter to marry a Uyghur or Muslim person, that could be a sign of extremism. If you refuse to drink, the Uyghur women usually don't do that kind of stuff in public, then you will be also in trouble. So some of the most commonly accepted, appreciated, protected behaviors, such as growing beard, wearing headscarf, was subject to criminalization, subject to detention in concentration camps. And then how do they implement this? Through technology. So they have this thing called IJOP, Integrated Joint Operating Platform, which was reverse engineered by Human Rights Watch. So if you charge your phone too many times, even if you end up leaving your house from the back door, that kind of harmless daily practices could make you a subject to be picked up through IJOP. Through the recently released secret documents, in 10 days in the summer of 2017, this particular platform, this technology, helped the Chinese to round up nearly 20,000 Uyghurs just in 10 days. That gives you a kind of perspective how pervasive, how horrific, how scary this thing is. And one of the important things, when you talk to, I receive phone calls and being contacted by Uyghur victims on a daily basis in the last 3 years. I've been hearing horrific stories. So one of the common stories that I hear, my mom and dad or my sister, brother did nothing other than going to the United States, Turkey, UAE, Pakistan, Central Asia. And because this detention order was generated by computer, no one knows. This is the most horrible, scary part. No one knows who will be next. So the people in constant fear of apprehension. So if you go to the street, you're subject to
So it is not always somebody making a decision that this person should go. It's some computer algorithm which is choosing who should be sent.
Algorithm. So imagine a East Germany Stasi with cloud computing ability to round up people. That's what the life of the Uyghurs have been in the last 2 years. We're always, rightfully so, focused on the people who are taken into the camp, but the people outside of the camp have been they have been under discussed. They have been as described, living in an open air prison like situation. So sometimes when people ask me, can you describe me what's happening to the Uyghur people, like how much time do I have, where do I begin? I never, it will be dishonest for anyone, even those who work on national security, foreign policy, in a government level, to claim that they know this was coming. I don't think anyone knew that this would get so bad, this bad. And the scale and scope of what is happening to the Uyghur people is even worse than what Secretary Pompeo has been saying. Yes, he's right that the world has not seen anything like it since the Holocaust.
You're watching Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and I'm talking with Commissioner Nouri Turtsil, and we'll be right back after these messages.
We are Justice for All. Headquartered in the heart of downtown Chicago, Justice for All is a global humanitarian initiative dedicated to raising awareness for human rights concerns impacting vulnerable minority groups. We promote policies that protect religious freedom, address the root causes of mass displacement, and recognize the plight of refugees and forced migrants. Our diverse team of staff and volunteers, led by Imam Malik Mujahid, work tirelessly to help Justice for All achieve their goals. Past campaigns covered a wide range of humanitarian concerns. Through Bosnia Task Force, imams and leaders of Chicago's Muslim community worked to ensure Bosnia became a top national issue. This led to life-saving American policies in Bosnia. A key accomplishment was helping to get rape declared a war crime. Initiatives also included Kosovo Task Force, Central African Republic Task Force, and Flint Coalition, which brought awareness to the water crisis affecting the people of Flint, Michigan. Highlights of our work include supporting Black Lives Matter, parliament of the world religions, addressing climate change.
So wasteful consumption starts the ruthless production, and that's where we need all the fossil fuel in the world.
And prominent media exposure.
This is Imam Malik Mujahid, President of Justice for All.
And I'm the Director of Outreach for Justice for All.
And that's why we need to go back to what worked.
Today we're demanding an apology from the CEO of Costco.
The Chinese crackdown on Uighurs and other Turkic people has only gotten worse.
Current programs such as Burma Task Force advocate for the rights of Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh, internally displaced populations, and all those denied freedom of movement and at risk of starvation. Through this, we mobilized thousands of calls to elected representatives. This paved the way for the U.S. to increase funding for Rohingya refugees from $30 million to over $600 million. 2 of our documentaries were featured on international news outlets. The Rohingya People, a slow-burning genocide, on BBC World News, and Rohingya Refugees Tel Aviv Massacre was featured on CNN. We've organized rallies, UN mission visits, expanded presentations on campuses, promoted research and report writing, outreach to think tanks, media, and other influencers. Faith Coalition educates about the Rohingya genocide and crimes against humanity faced by ethnic groups in Burma. We've traveled to refugee camps, convened a meeting of Karen, Kachin, and Rohingya leaders, both to encourage cooperation and to guide them in congressional outreach. We organized Rohingya Advocacy Day. This led to over 100 participants visiting the offices of 60 U.S. senators and congressional representatives. Free Kashmir advocates for the people of Kashmir. Long-term goals include the call for self-determination, the end of the Indian military's occupation of the territory, and raising awareness of Kashmiri issues among the American people. After the August 5th reinvasion of Kashmir, we organized national protests in front of various Indian government buildings, partnered with Stand with Kashmir, and launched a petition condemning the Gates Foundation's decision to present Prime Minister Modi a humanitarian award. Save Uyghur informs Muslims and neighbors of other faiths about the ongoing cultural genocide of Uyghur Muslims and mobilizes public support. Our projects include boycotting Chinese products with our Fast from China campaign, pushing Bill S-178 in the Senate, and organizing a nationwide protest of Costco. Together, we can continue to stand up for justice. Justice for all.
Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid. I'm talking with Mr. Nouri Turkal. Nouri, when before the break we were talking, you mentioned there are 3 levels of government. One is that the guy who is running the whole show. Then there is somebody Uyghur who is just helpless, powerless, but his name is being used. Then there is a third one, which seems to be a very independent system of governance in itself, with its prison system and all that. Who are those people? These are the Chinese settlers who have been brought into Uyghur area. What is that system?
So this is a direct a byproduct of strange marital situation that Stalin and Mao got themselves into in the post-Second World War situation. So Stalin helped to deliver Uyghurs' homeland and silver platter to Mao, and yet that suspicion never disappeared. So what he wanted is to create a buffer zone between Soviet Union and Communist China. How is going to do it? And somebody told him, or somebody in the Chinese government suggested that they need to have a paramilitary presence. One, to keep an eye on the Soviet Union. On the other hand, they will be embedded in the village level to keep an eye on the Uyghurs. So this, the full name is Xinjiang Construction Corp. Xinjiang Jianzhou Bingtuan is the Chinese name. Was set up as a paramilitary unit without a uniform. They have divisions all around the region, and they have been controlling much of the water resources. So this is important to highlight, because the region is a lack of water for Uyghur farmers, because it's a dry area, much like the Central California. So if you don't have enough water, the irrigation, the regular course of farming would be very difficult. So how do they do that? They need to control by giving this authority to the Construction Corp. And now going forward, the Construction Corp also controls the cotton production. But now this ironic setup that we have today, that multinational corporations making China as a production base, much of the assembly line, textile, cotton products made in China, has assembly lines in the region. And now we are people who are living, as a people living in the Western world of free societies, aiding those entities, those economic system with supply chain to get enriched. As reported, and I testified in this that you mentioned earlier, more than 80% of the cotton products made in China sourced in the Uyghur region.
And,
so
30% of all cotton in the US is coming from there.
Right. So the Chinese effectively polluted the global supply chain by using slave labor.
So it's called the Construction Corps, essentially.
Yes. So this is a multifaceted, and in order to accomplish China's cultural genocide or cultural annihilation, so they're using the labor, the alleviation of poverty. That's a nice slogan for the Chinese government. Alleviation of poverty is a human rights. That's how they describe human rights.
But they also describe it that Uyghur are separatists. They want to create another country, and it was always a part of China. So we're trying to fight separatism, and these are all terrorists. I mean, the word terrorist was used by everybody around the world, and it's still being used. So when China decided that you are a terrorist?
Well, any government that has a problem with political resentment for their political expediency, label that individual as a terrorist. We've seen this all around the world. But what is ironic about this separatism claim is that the Western countries, the Uyghur sympathizers, think that's like a touchy subject. No, it's not a touchy subject. If you respect somebody's human rights, you should also respect that individual or that group's desire to be independent. It's no-brainer. So, and then if the Chinese think that the Uyghurs are separatists and they should have a reason to crush them, then we will have a lot of problem around the world if that's an acceptable notion. Like the central government, federal government in Washington should crush the people in California and Texas. I know it's not the perfect example, but people they should have a political desire. They should have a desire to have their own house, just like individually we desire to have their own privacy and a house that we can raise family and have a private life. So there's nothing wrong with Uyghurs to have a desire. At the same time, the Western governments that worked with the communist Chinese authorities in post 9/11 environment bear some responsibility. Some government officials in Europe, even here in the United States, mistakenly believed early on that China is also fighting a similar type of war that the United States was waging. That was a mistake. That was a strategic blunder. Chinese government, to this day, to this minute, misused the word counterterrorism. To them, counterterrorism means minority report type of a scenario. It's like a preemptive measure to think, not based on somebody's behavior. If somebody think or perceived by the Chinese government as a problematic, have a separatist tendencies or violent tendencies or devout, pious Muslim practices, then it's it's like if you show any of those hallmarks, even today after the passage of the Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act, China said, "Oh, this is not the United States is so wrong." They don't understand. We're fighting against three forces: extremism, terrorism, and separatism. What convenient terminology for the Chinese. Whenever anyone hears the word separatist or terrorist, they just back off. That's the way that people been living since 9/11. Like whenever the word terrorism comes up, even the most fair-minded people will have a pause in their support of someone. So the Chinese government has been actively, effectively exploiting this fear that some countries, some societies legitimately have in a post-9/11 world.
The Uyghur which I have met are very peaceful and thoughtful people, just concerned that why world is allowing all of this to happen. Are there some instances in which Uyghurs have resorted to violence in a larger scale, which is being used by the Chinese government?
I like not saying that I am part of that blood. I am also Uyghur. You're absolutely right. The Uyghurs are one of the most peaceful people around the world. The Uyghurs are one of the most patient people around the world, one of the most accommodating, one of the most resilient people around the world, one of the most kind people around the world. And yet the Chinese turned them into some sort of imaginary monster, try to scare away the public support and sympathy that may have been the case for years. So, I challenge the world, I challenge your listeners and the viewers to think, what has the Chinese government done to you to think that they are fighting, engaging in a legitimate struggle against Uyghur people? Yeah, this is a soul-searching moment for anyone who think or has inclined to think that the China has a reason. They don't. This is not about, recently this concentration camp concept came up. Yes, it is a concentration camp. No doubt about it. I can go on for half an hour to describe go over all of the historic concentration camps and tell you these are the concentration camps. Simply put, they're extrajudicial. The people locked up based on ethnicity and religion. People don't know when they will be out. When they were out, they never compensated, never told why they were in. So when you look through the history, these commonalities are very, very similar to the ones that we've seen at Dachau and at Auschwitz. So, the crime is there. So I am surprised that the international community, particularly the Muslim community, is allowing this communist regime to systematically destroy this proud religion, proud nation, claiming that Islam is a mental illness, thought virus, at the same time shaking hand with people like Xi Jinping as MBS did. While his name was banned in China, the way of greeting is banned in China, his beard is banned in China, and he's groomed to be the next custodian of two holiest mosque for the Muslim people, still going on business usual. Pakistani Prime Minister, another example. He feigned twice in public, feigned ignorance twice in public that he did not know. That is not true. The Minister of Human Rights of Pakistan also claiming that she didn't. It's impossible. These people need to look at the mirror and see how they feel when after making that kind of comments. This is a matter of conscience. I am so grateful, not because I'm part of the U.S. government now. I'm so grateful. I think the American public, the American government playing the best of this country and this nation by speaking out on
I
behalf of.
I hope we will take our country continuously forward and forward in saving lives and protection of all rights in America and abroad. So we will continue to improve. And thanks to the type of efforts that you put in, Nori, tell me this Uyghur Act, which has been passed, what will it do for Uyghur people?
The historic bill, the bipartisan bicameral bill, does several things. The first and foremost, it will update the Uyghur issue in the U.S.-China relations. So it will be included in the regular talking points in engagement with the Chinese government. And second, this bill directs the President of the United States to impose sanction on the Chinese officials and entities that are responsible for human rights abuses committed against the Uyghurs and other Muslim people. The Global Magnitsky Act have been enforced since 2016, but only one Chinese official has been sanctioned under this law. So the Uyghur Act, the Uyghur Policy Act, will make the president to go after the Chinese government officials. And then three, the law enforcement aspect of this bill. This is the first time, you can correct me if you know anything like it, but this is the first time that our government, through law enforcement mechanism, through legislative mandate, to protect their own citizens against a foreign influence. So as we speak in the United States,
You're referring to Uyghur being harassed in America.
Yes, as we speak.
To the level that now the government has to pass a law that we will be keeping an eye that they are not attacked here in America.
Yes. So this law, this particular provision, law enforcement provision, requires FBI to investigate and tell the Congress the measures it has been implemented to protect the Uyghur Americans and the Uyghur residents who hold Chinese citizenship. The Chinese have been harassing, intimidating, in some instances trying to recruit them to become informants. And this law will address that serious issue. Our sovereignty is under attack by the Communist Chinese
regime.
So who
are the people who China is using inside America to go after Uyghur people?
Yes. They create false controversies. They intentionally target Uyghur activists to make them questionable individuals in the society. They also make an effort to join the Uyghur organizations to take up leadership. I have not seen it, but there's a document being circulated a while back. It specifically said that the Chinese government tries to encourages pro-government individuals to join quote-unquote separatist organizations to create problem and report. So that's the law enforcement. And then the State Department's requirement of making a separate reporting, human rights reporting on the Uyghurs. And finally, this is also very unique. The Director of National Intelligence, who is overseeing over 18 intelligence agencies for the United States, is also required to investigate the forced labor situation around the world, as well as refoulement of the Uyghur refugees from neighboring countries and the Middle Eastern countries, even in the situation that they're seeking asylum. So this law, I cannot emphasize enough of the importance, historic importance of this bill. That for the first time in Uyghurs' human history, a government placed a legislative mandate to protect Uyghur people's political, religious, and cultural rights. This is very significant, and I would like to see traditional U.S. allies in other countries, if they care about human rights, if they care about democratic norms, if they care about religious freedom, to put in consider similar legislation. If not, they should implement the existing legal tools such as Magnitsky Act that Canada has one, the UK has one, Some of the Baltic states have. The Australia is in the process of putting in place similar legislation or legal tool. So this is this should be a model. This should not be the ending of the process. This should be just the beginning of the process to address a legitimate.
In the current pandemic situation, in which and also that China and America are coming in conflict and some sort of Cold War type situation is developing. China is going around in the world distributing their supplies to deal with the pandemic to several African and Asian countries, have extended diplomatic help and financial help, and using money for corruption, money which they acquired through surplus trade from the United States. They seems to be taking full advantage of it to strengthen their power. How in this situation can the rest of the world do more things for people?
Putting aside a political discussion, strong statements made against the Chinese state, I can attest that the Uyghur situation, the Uyghur crisis, receiving bipartisan support. As displayed and shown in the recent voting, that 413 members of the Congress voted in favor of the Uyghur bill. And also the Senate, it was a unanimous consent. There was no one opposed to the bill. Out of 550 members of Congress, 513 voted in favor. And President Trump, who's not a big fan of some members of Congress who championed this bill, signed the law into effect. Yes, China is a serious problem. Yes, China has been eating America's lunch in the last 20, 30 years. The serious national security concern must be addressed. President Trump's national security advisor just delivered an amazing speech in Arizona. In several places, he referenced how much the U.S. Congress, United States government concerned about the Uyghur situation. So sooner or later, this has to be addressed. But I don't think, I also acknowledge the fact that countries have their own national interest in their relationship with China. I also acknowledge the fact that countries have economic interest in their relationship with China like our own. But what should not be the case is that the human rights concern be sacrificed for economic interest. That should be separated. So the United States government should not do business. This is the same call for our European allies. As long as the China runs and maintains runs concentration camps, as long as China continues to pollute a global supply chain, the business as usual must stop. Full stop. So we cannot. It's just the Chinese government is testing the conscience of the civilized world. We should not let that continue to be the case.
Well, thank you so much, Rhetorical Commissioner, for your time. You have been a human rights activist. You are standing up not for your people, but for Guantanamo Bay, to providing people asylum. And I see more and more responsibilities coming towards your way. That's how America enriches itself, by people who are fighting for the freedom of others, using our freedom and liberty to do so, enriches America. That's the strength of our country. I'd like to salute you for your work. Thank you so much. You are contributing to America, liberating us, and reaffirming our commitment to freedom and liberty and justice for all. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me. I'd like to repeat what I said earlier on. As part of the Uyghur community in the United States, I personally appreciative of your effort to educate the public about the crimes being committed against Uyghur people. Thank you very much for that.
You're most welcome. Thank you. You're watching Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and I've been talking with Commissioner Nouri Turkle. And you can always watch us in the same channel you're watching on Galaxy 19 satellite, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and also on Muslim Network TV. And thank you for our producers, Zahra Nadeem, and our intern producer, Sumaya Head. Peace. Salam.